Welcome back to episode 8.
Episode 8. We're flying through this season.
I know. Mike and I talked about this last time. I can't believe that we're actually on episode 8 and that it's April 2024.
Yeah, it feels like we just started this season, so.
Crazy. So, a new thing this season. So, first of all, welcome back. Sorry, I didn't have any dark matter, but Mike and I have some IPA. So
don't judge me. Mine's like
good.
almost done already. We're just starting, but that's okay.
We had a few technical issues, so the beer was necessary. Yes, so episode 8, Mike and I are amazed at how fast this season went. And we have some, I'm not going to give it away, but we do have some fun things we're going to try for the end of the season.
We do.
Yeah. Okay, so episode.
But not for today.
Not for today. Yeah, nothing exciting today. So just go about your business. Okay, today's quick cut. My quick cut is It's a Wonderful Knife from 2023.
Yep.
Directed by Tyler McIntyre, starring Justin Long, Joel McHale, and Jane Widdop. I think I got that right. I'm not going to say much about this. It's okay. It's a Christmas slasher. That's what I will say.
Yep.
It's unfortunate. I think Justin Long is kind of wasted in this. He has a small bit part, and it's kind of he plays kind of the usual knob that he plays, but with a more sinister edge.
Yeah, he's not as lovable this time.
No. So do I recommend it? Nah. It's holiday season, sure. Watch this with Black Christmas, maybe.
Yeah, I was kind of anticipating this one because Justin Long, I like him. I loved Barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
But I was disappointed. I actually don't think you should go watch this probably. But
there you go. I was trying to be positive.
Honestly, like for Christmas horror, you could do better.
Yeah, fair enough.
Stick with Thanksgiving and Black Christmas.
Yeah, fair. I can't really argue with that. What's your quick pick?
Okay. My quick pick is Dream Scenario, starring none other than Nicolas Cage. So Dream Scenario is Paul Matthews, a university professor who suddenly is showing up in everyone's dreams. So this one's have you seen Dream Scenario?
Is it a Nicolas Cage movie?
Yeah, which I seem to recall last episode you chose a Nicolas Cage movie. That was really good.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think Nicolas Cage is really good in this. It's as per usual with his shtick these days, which is picking really out there, interesting, unique kind of indie films. So it's kind of a thriller, kind of a drama. It's got some romance. It's got some comedy. And it also has the most awkward sex scene I've ever seen in a movie ever.
Wow.
Which is worth watching just for that alone.
Awkward Nicolas Cage sex? Like, I can't even imagine.
Like uncomfortably awkward. But I liked it. It's good. And I think it does, in the final act, become horror. I watched it with my wife and my in-laws, and I could tell the way they were squirming. They were a bit caught off guard with how dark it got. So I highly recommend Dream Scenario. Whether you love or hate Nicolas Cage, I think it's worth watching.
Okay, interesting.
It's got some commentary on cancel culture, I think. But
do you dream about Nicolas Cage?
I've had a few dreams about Nicolas Cage.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. All right, that's my quick cut.
Okay, and that's recent, I think, isn't it? Is it like 2024?
I think it's the tail end of 2023, and I watched it in 2024. All right. Maybe it came out in 2024. But yeah, it's recent for sure.
Speaking of recent, nice segue. Thank you very much. We are doing a recent, I believe this was released in 2023 in some parts of the world, but at least the release date's 2023. But we are doing 2023/24 stop motion. All one word.
Such a morbid imagination, bringing dead things to life.
Hey, she emerges from her cave.
Hello.
When do you think you'll finish this film of yours?
I don't know. What's all that stuff?
It's called stop motion animation.
What do you think?
It's a bit boring.
It's not finished. I mean, it's not boring.
Make a new one.
A new one?
Yeah.
I believe this is a British film. I labeled it psychological folk horror. I don't know if that would, if that's the official designation. Robert Morgan is the director. I think I heard him pronounce it Ashlyn.
I think that's right.
I think it's Ashlyn Franciosi as Ella, and she was in The Nightingale and Last Voyage of the Demeter.
And in some Game of Thrones episodes too, I think.
Oh, okay. There you go. I didn't have that TV reference. Stella, I think it's Gonay, is the mother, and she was recently in El Conde.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I recognized her. Okay.
Tom York is the boyfriend, and I didn't see anything in his filmography, so I don't know if he's actually a newish actor. And then this is a Celtic name, but it's Kaylin Springall as the girl, and we'll talk about as the I've called her the neighbor girl, but there's more to it than that, I think. So I
have a question for you. What made you choose this film? Where did you hear about this one? Because this one was not on my radar.
So this one, okay, it's a bit of a long story, but bear with me. So this one I saw on the Rotten Tomatoes list. And the little trick that I learned from Mike last year, although Rotten Tomatoes isn't a great list for horror, so Mike's advice to me was look at the consensus tab.
That's right.
Because if there's no consensus, it means that it hasn't really been watched enough and reviewed enough, right?
There was a lot of 100%.
Yes.
That they weren't by consensus and they were terrible films. So I'm like, there's something off here. But.
So I saw this on the Rotten Tomatoes list, and then I decided that I'm going to go check out. I just watched the trailer, I think, on Netflix. Is this on Netflix? Where did I watch this? No,
Shudder, isn't it?
Oh, is it on Shudder? I don't think so.
Oh, I thought it did the little dun dun like the Shudder thing at the beginning.
It is on Shudder streaming in Britain. I didn't find it on the Canadian Shudder.
Right.
Now, Late Night with the Devil is supposed to be on the Canadian Shudder starting April 19th.
Oh, nice.
And I don't know if that one's going to show up or not either, because they're regionally kind of like Netflix and HBO and whatever. You get different shows in different regions. Right. So anyway, I saw that and I thought, that's kind of interesting. And the preview kind of reminded me a little bit of Hereditary.
Yeah, actually, I made a note about something about Hereditary.
Yeah, and also reminded me a little bit of Censor.
Me too. I also wrote that. Notes. That's crazy.
So I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And the subject matter, which was stop motion animation, was really interesting to me too, because that's not something that you see a lot of.
No, I mean, even just seeing stop motion films is rare, but then a film about a person who makes stop motion films. I don't even know if I've seen that before.
So, so the summary of this film, and then I'll give you the IMDb and Rotten Tomato breakdown. Ella Blake is a stop motion animator struggling to control her demons after the loss of her overbearing mother. She embarks upon the creation of a film that becomes the battleground for her sanity. As Ella's mind starts to fracture, the characters in her project take on a life of their own. So this got 5.6 on IMDb, respectable, 90% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and 50% audience. We seem to have a knack for this.
Yes.
Okay, so before I get into performances, tell me a little bit about, so you said this wasn't on your radar, this one?
No, it wasn't. I think on YouTube I saw that someone had reviewed it. But that's all I knew. I didn't know anything about it. It wasn't really on my radar, despite looking. So it was on the 2023 list of Rotten Tomato films.
I thought it was 2024.
Oh, okay. I've not looked at that one yet. Okay. That makes sense. So maybe that's why it wasn't on my radar. But no, when you said it, I had maybe heard about it once in passing, so I knew nothing about it. I did not watch a trailer. I just went in blind.
So that's good, because I had some expectations having seen a trailer.
Right.
So you went in blind. What was your...
It's interesting. My daughter's been doing a lot of stop animation.
Oh, no kidding.
So she's used a camera, and she usually Lego or Playmobil, or she'll draw pictures. So I was kind of like, oh, this should be interesting, because she's been really into stop animation. And then is it Mad God?
Yes, which I haven't watched. It's on my list.
Me neither. And I feel like these two might pair well together, because that's all stop animation, I think.
So you watched this with your daughter then, because she's into stop motion?
No, but that opening scene where she's doing the stop, I called her in and we watched the first scene together, just because I thought she would be interested, and she was. So
I mean, there's some sinister overtones, but nothing really happened.
Yeah, she was a bit creeped out at first. Like, no, just stick with it. It's tame. It's okay. Yeah, so I had that little bit of extra interest just because that's what we've been doing at home.
Now, I don't know if you're aware that Robert Morgan, the director, has also done a bunch of stop motion shorts.
That's primarily his filmography,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So is this his first?
I don't think it's his first feature, but I could be mistaken.
Okay. Yeah, that made sense to me once I finished the movie,
Okay.
which might tell you a little bit about what I thought about it. But I think, not to spoil anything, I'm definitely more in the audience 50%.
Oh, interesting.
Even though I appreciate a lot about this film, and I think the stop animation parts are the highlight, I thought the film overall didn't quite work for me.
Yeah, I have some niggles for sure. I'm probably fence sitting. I'm not in the 90% critics.
Yeah.
My opinion of it wasn't that high, but I wouldn't say I'm down in the 50s. Like, I think it was a better film than that.
Yes.
So for example, I mean, I'll just jump in. So for performances,
Yep.
I thought that Ashlyn as Ella was outstanding, especially the third act of the film where she takes a left turn.
Yes.
Like, I thought
Performances were really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought the boyfriend was maybe a little bit
Yeah,
meh.
he was the one that was like, but the young girl,
Yep.
Kaylin,
Yep.
and
I liked his
Ashlyn.
sister too.
Yeah, she was pretty
was
good.
kind of
She had a
interesting.
minor role, but she was good.
Yeah.
But the two, like I don't. This isn't a spoiler, I don't think. I mean, well, maybe it is. The role of the younger.
I think just saying there's a girl is not what her role is. Might be a spoiler, but
Okay, fair enough.
fact that there's a girl
we'll talk
character.
about that when we
Yeah.
get into spoilers. And yeah, so there's.
and the mother was very good.
Yes, and that's kind of, I think that's where the hereditary element came in for me, was not only the mother-daughter relationship, which you don't see in Hereditary. It's only implied
Yeah.
because the movie starts with the mom's death, right? But in this one, what I found really interesting was, the mother, at least the scenes that we see the mother in the beginning, she's almost the puppet master.
Totally.
Pulling the strings of her daughter.
Yeah.
And it's not until the mother has a little bout of illness that the daughter thinks she has to do this on her own.
Which is similar to Hereditary in that they're both
Yes.
very hyper controlling.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the ages are different because the daughter in Hereditary was an older established. I mean, she was already a mother and so on. This is a younger version, but you get that same vibe where the hyper controlling mother
Yes.
and the daughter is kind of left in her shadow.
And I think also leads to their hobbies because Toni Collette's character in Hereditary is all about painting those miniature sets, which is all about kind of having maximum control and
Yes.
inserting control. And then
Yeah.
in this case, the daughter's doing the stop motion where she has a lot of control.
Yeah.
So in both, I thought there were some parallels there in terms of the daughters taking up hobbies that involve having control because they never had any in their relationship.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Now the director said he actually had to teach Ashlyn how to do the stop motion.
Okay.
And he said she was a natural. Like she just got it and she was really good at it right off the bat. So he didn't have to do much with her, but she didn't know anything to start with.
Oh, that's neat.
So especially because you're doing scenes where, your main character is performing the stop motion stuff, it makes sense to me that they would have to know what they were doing. I mean, I guess you could have done kind of a extreme close-up hands and it could have been somebody else's hands, but he didn't go that route. Speaking of which, I mean, for the technical stuff, I thought that the extreme close-ups worked really well.
Yeah. Any complaints I have of this movie are not on a technical level. Like you're right. All the performances are good. Cinematography was good. They did some interesting stuff with lighting. All the stop animation was really engaging and technically well done. As a film, I don't know if it comes together for me, but yeah, I don't have any technical complaints.
So it's interesting to me. I mean, aside from the brother, so with all those things having been said, where do you think it doesn't gel for you? Like where
Did you find it really slow?
Well, I wrote down that it's a slow burn and then it kind of like flips on the light switch at the end.
It does. Yeah.
The last 10 minutes or so.
Though her performance is good, I maybe found the main character just not that interesting or a little bit woe is me or a little bit flat. I didn't really buy her relationship with her boyfriend very much. There wasn't many other relationships to have. The mother is in it for a limited amount of time.
Yeah.
And even the little girl is kind of unlikable. Like I think in films, I'm very much drawn to the characters, and I was pretty underwhelmed by what was happening with the characters in this movie. And to me, this felt like a movie that would have almost been a good short. Like I didn't feel like there was enough meat in the first half to make it compelling enough so that when the third act does drop, I wasn't overly invested, even though I appreciated what was happening and there was some like cool moments and some good body horror.
Yeah.
But I just wasn't that invested in the film.
So what would need to change for that? Like, did there need to be more backstory with her mom? Did there need to be like, what is it that might have?
Okay. I think it's a little bit of a one-trick pony. They're kind of just playing with this idea,
Right.
this singular idea that her mom controlled her. She didn't have any agency. She lacks creativity, and that this girl is here to help her with creativity. And beyond that, I just didn't feel like there was much. They were just kind of dwelling on that and a bit of the evolution of the stop motion stuff. It just didn't feel like enough meat to make a film, and I wasn't that compelled. Like, there's really not a whole lot happening.
No, but so I guess my question would be, I see this as operating quite a bit on a metaphorical
It totally is.
level. So that means you've got to be thinking, or you've got to be connecting with it on that level.
And that's maybe what it was too. I
Okay.
feel like I'd figured that out
Yeah.
so quick. I think we're going to say there's a twist in this movie. And I called the twist within like 2 minutes.
Right.
Like, I bet you that's what this is. And that's what it was. And so
Right.
maybe it was hard to go along for the ride. The metaphor just seemed too obvious, or I don't know. Maybe because it was so similar to Censor or Hereditary, it just didn't grab me. I don't know.
Well, fair enough, right? Like, I mean, this isn't obviously from the audience scores. This is going to be for everybody. I felt like it was interesting to me how it was operating on that metaphorical level of kind of the puppet master and the puppet, and not just about stop motion, but about art in general and the relationship of artist to their art.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, does art take on a life of its own?
Yeah. Which I appreciate the metaphor.
Yeah.
But I think a really good horror movie has the metaphor, but then also has other compelling elements on top of it. Like, I think something like, what's the hand one? Talk to Me.
Talk to Me. Okay.
I think Talk to Me has those sort of metaphorical layers, but it also has a lot of compelling characters, and it's more entertaining, and there's a lot more going on. And that's where I feel like this maybe would have better short film, because I think the metaphor was interesting. I think there was lots of good moments. It just seemed to have a lot of treading water maybe in the first two acts, that just, if you cut out some of that stuff and had a short film that was really tight and on point, I guess that's sort of how I'm feeling.
Yeah, it definitely would. It was a slow, I don't even know if I want to call it a burn, but it was slow getting started. And it's interesting because it's slow, but it doesn't really give you a lot of background on anything. Like, it doesn't give you background on her and her mom, or her and her boyfriend, or like why she is kind of the mousy character that she is. Like, that might have been helpful. Like, where is this coming from?
Yeah. Like, did it remind you of Men at all? Because it's operating on such a metaphorical level.
A little bit. Yeah. A little bit.
But with Men, I felt like, I don't quite get what's going on here. I want to watch it again. Whereas this one, maybe I feel like I figured out the metaphor so early that then
yeah,
I was just like, okay, we're just going through.
It is I think pretty easy. Well, because it was pretty obvious to me where it was going pretty quickly in the film.
So I wasn't like, oh, what does this mean? And oh, what's going on here? I was just like, oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And then I didn't find any of the character interactions to be interesting enough or compelling enough to really keep me entertained. So the third act does hit pretty hard.
It does.
And that was pretty entertaining. But I wasn't invested enough to really make it work for me. So I think if you like art house independent horror films that are slow burns, you might like it because I think there's a lot to appreciate here. Like
For
I
sure.
appreciate the film,
For sure.
but it didn't work for me in a way where I would say I really enjoyed it, and I'm not sure I'd recommend it.
So there's a bunch of things to talk about, but I think they're all spoilers.
For sure, yeah. It's hard to talk about the metaphor without.
So I wonder if do we want to just? I know it's a little shorter than we usually do, but do you want to just kind of give it a yay or nay and then get into spoilers? Because I think some of this is operating on a level where if I can't talk about
Yeah, for sure.
the spoiler parts, then I can't really talk.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that means it seems pretty clear what you're.
Yeah. I did like this. The stop animation is very impressive. And how they integrate stop motion into like body horror was pretty
Yes.
cool. I'd not seen that before. So I don't want to say that there's nothing of value here. It probably is a worthwhile watch. But of all the films I've watched recently, this one landed pretty meh.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can.
But I think I was in the, 90% critic score though.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely. It's a cautious recommend for me in the sense that I think you do have to enjoy those art house kind of indie films to sit down and get through this, because if you're expecting kind of, action from the beginning, you're going to be disappointed because it's particularly the first act is really slow.
Yeah, and I don't mind. That's the interesting thing. I don't mind slow burn, like independent art house films. Like Censor, I liked a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
Just this one.
Yeah. And that's what happens, right? Sometimes it just doesn't connect with you for some reason. I mean, so yeah, I would say it's not an enthusiastic, like go out and watch it right now, but it's like, yeah, I think, have this in your stable for later.
Yeah.
And you might enjoy it, but yeah, that's all I have to say. So do we want to jump into spoilers?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
We can do that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Spoilers.
So I just had an upcoming thing spoiled for me.
Okay, I got to talk about the little girl.
Yep.
Kaylin.
Yep.
So this was answered for me later on in the film, but
Okay.
early in the film, it was like, is that her? Like, is that a manifestation of her?
That's what I thought almost immediately.
And then, of course, later in the film, well, 2 times for sure answer that question for me. One, the girl shows up at the party, like just out of the blue.
Mhm.
It's like, no, she's not real.
Yeah.
And then Ella strangles her,
Mhm.
and the girl doesn't die. So it's like, I'm pretty sure you're not real. So my takeaway in the last couple of minutes of the film, it seems like Ella had, and I know this is not a clinical diagnosis, but it seems like she had multiple personalities, or at least suffered from some kind of delusional
Yeah.
thinking.
That's what I find tricky about these films that are operating on a metaphorical level
Mhm.
is you can't tell, is this girl just meant to symbolize like her lost creativity, or does this character have like a diagnosable psychological disorder? And in this case, it seemed to me more like the film was just using a metaphor. Like, I don't know if they were trying to say that she had a disorder.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the problem. Like, I almost would have liked it more if it was just a neighbor girl that she ran into in the hallway in her building, but some kind of creepy neighbor girl that like something was not quite right about.
Yeah. And I feel like if this was the first film I'd seen that did that, I might think it was amazing. But I've seen that so many times now where there's a character that's not really the real character. It's
Yeah.
a manifestation of
Yeah.
part of their personality or whatever. So I was just like, okay, like within 2 minutes, they looked so similar too.
Yeah, they did.
That's kind of what tipped me off.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I started thinking about it, she just seemed too out there and weird and quirky and not realistic, that she just didn't seem like a real girl. And she would just show up out of the blue.
Well, also, it seemed to me that Ella was trying to please her, the young
Yes.
girl, which to me was why I interpreted it as a manifestation of her inner child.
Yeah.
And that this is something that she could never have control over when she was younger because of her domineering mother.
Yes.
So this is the person that steps out and tells her, okay, this is what you've got to do. You've got to I'm going to help you make your own movie.
And do you think they connected those dots too quickly? Because there's a scene where she says to her mother, "Oh, I've got some ideas."
Mm-hmm.
Her mother kind of sloughs her off. And then the next day she's like, "Okay, what's your idea?" And she blanks. She's got nothing.
Yeah.
And then when her mother has a second stroke, I guess.
Yeah.
And then this girl kind of shows up out of nowhere. And then she has all these creative ideas. It just felt too much like
Right.
1, 2, 3. So clearly this is meant to be like her creative side now is able to like come to life because her mother's not in the picture. Is that how you read that?
Yes. That she had some she had some freedom to stretch because her mother wasn't judging her.
Yeah, like that part of her had been suppressed and was not able to come alive because her mother's presence. As soon as her mother's not in the picture, then like that side's able to come out.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it.
And I think had I made that connection later in the film, I may would appreciate it more. But I feel like, not to say it just seemed too obvious.
It seemed pretty obvious to me too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I looked for validation later in the film, but 100%, that was the first thing that came into my mind was there's something funky about that girl.
Yeah.
And I think that she's not real.
For sure. And the whole puppet master, and she's so controlling, that metaphor seems so in your face that maybe I like them more when you got to figure it out a little bit more. It's a little more subtle. Like this just seems so obvious.
Yeah, it's a bit on the nose for sure. Now, I don't think this is true, but I'm open to the idea that this could be interpreted this way. But so when her boyfriend and his sister come at the end of the film, like in the last act.
Yeah.
Did you interpret that as real? Like she did kill them?
I wasn't sure.
Okay.
And I've seen it go both ways in other movies.
Yeah, me too.
I think in the end I came to the conclusion that it was real. What did you? How did you land on
that was my take too, because at first I was like, there's all these. Okay, well, first of all, there's the egg-shaped thing from the beginning, and the Ashman character, one of the wax characters, ends up. Does it come out of his mouth, or does he pull it out of, like, does he put it in her mouth with his hand? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think with his hand.
But anyway, there's this egg-shaped thing, and I'm like, I wrote a note to myself. I was like, okay, is this a weird form of impregnation? Like, what is he doing with this egg thing? And then, so in the final act, when she comes out of the hospital, when Ella comes out of the hospital, she digs this thing out of her leg, which is brutal.
Yeah, it was pretty gross.
And then she proceeds to pretty much bludgeon her boyfriend. She bludgeons the sister.
With a tripod.
With a tripod, and like it's pretty nasty. Although it's kind of garbled. You don't see, like, it doesn't linger on the scene, but you get a pretty clear picture.
Hey, dude, doesn't it like pull out part of her throat?
Yeah, but they don't hang there.
No, I guess
it's
not.
a quick cut.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
But yeah, it's obvious
show
what
it.
they're doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, and then there was a throwback to when she was in bed with her boyfriend and she covers his nose.
Yes.
And that's how she kills him, right? Covers his mouth and nose. So, yeah. So the first time, when I watched it, I was like, okay, I've seen movies do this both ways, where that's in the character's head, and then later, kind of like American Psycho.
Totally.
It's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's good.
Did he actually do all this, or is this like his breakdown happening, and all of these things are things that he wanted to do but never actually did them?
Yeah, I find it became so surrealist and so muddled what was real and not real, and the blending of real life happenings with the stop animation monsters.
Yeah.
Kind of just went to gobbledygook and didn't. Whereas I think I prefer the more logical explanations at times, where it's like, oh yeah, okay, she had multiple personality disorder, and these scenes are real and these scenes aren't real. Or when there's like a visual cue, like, oh, when it's lit in like blue, we know that that's not real. But then when it's natural light, you know that is real. But I didn't, and I'd have to go back and watch it again to like figure it out for sure. But I didn't feel like there was any rules in terms of here's how we can tell what's real or not real.
Exactly.
It just kind of all blends together in this crazy, ethereal, surrealist.
Yeah, I didn't get any sense definitively one way or the other. And I is your take at the very end that she's dead and that she comes into that toy box / coffin thing with the
I did land there ultimately, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because everything was operating on that kind of metaphorical level. Her going into the thing,
Yeah.
closing the lid is like she was dead. Spoilers.
We are in the spoiler
We have the spoiler section, so it's okay. What did you make of all the steak? There's a lot of meat in this movie and a lot of like they're eating steak and the way the mother's doing steak and then they wrap the doll in meat. There's a lot of meat in this movie.
Yeah, I that's a good question.
And like the fleshy sounds. I'm like, oh, they really like the meat.
It's hard not to like the meat.
I was disappointed when we weren't having steak for dinner.
I don't know if that was like I found it hard to interpret that. Like, what is this a body horror kind of gross out thing, or is it operating on a different level there? I mean, it seems to me that that's kind of why I put the folk horror tag on my interpretation of this as like psychological folk horror because of the wax figures, the stop motion figures, and because they create for her movie. They create that with like meat and ash and wax and all these different things to make them more real.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I wondered on that level, is that what's going on? Like, was this supposed to be some kind of, maybe trick is a bad word, but some way that you're, like some kind of voodoo thing where your juju is creating something with meat.
Yeah.
That and of course the Ashman character, at least my interpretation was manifests at least twice, once in the stairwell and then comes out of the diorama.
Yeah. What was your take on the Ashman?
In what way? Like,
did you think it symbolized anything or did you?
I don't have enough information to know that. Nothing rang a bell for me in terms of mythology or anything.
Yeah. The only thing I could think, because they don't ever mention her father, correct?
No.
And because he would like come to the cabin and like kind of taunt her. And I was wondering if maybe she was like abused by her father and maybe the Ashman was meant to represent maybe some kind of abuse that she had from her father. And because the mother was weird, maybe they lived in an abusive family or something. I don't think there's any real overt hint to that idea.
No, not that I got anyway.
But even the fact that it was a man, like the Ash Man, and there was no father and no reference of a father, and he wasn't in the picture, and they're both kind of messed up. I wondered if maybe the Ash Man was meant to represent maybe an abusive father figure at some point.
And few male characters in general. I mean, the boyfriend is a side figure.
Yeah.
And then you saw a couple of men when she goes to work for the sister.
Yeah.
Like in the studio, but they're very minor characters. So,
yeah, you can make the argument she has a stronger interaction with the boyfriend's sister maybe than even the boyfriend.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought maybe they're playing with was maybe commentary on like the horror genre and creativity, because she's lacking creativity. And they start with like a wax ball and then like, oh, well, now let's get some meat. And then, oh, let's go get a dead animal. And then, oh, now let's start using parts of your own flesh. I wasn't sure if that was maybe supposed to be a metaphor for if the horror genre is lacking creativity, that they make up for that by just making things more grotesque and more disgusting and more over the top. So I was like, oh, is like Terrifier 2 supposed to be like the human flesh equivalent to the final doll? So, and it seemed like the mother had genuine thought behind the movie she was making. And then what the daughter wanted was maybe just gross stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I definitely felt that the art in the film was operating on that metaphorical level. Like, can the artist, control their art when art takes on a life of its own? So what I'm thinking of there is, a popular film or a popular album or a popular novel. Once it's been created by the artist and they let it go into the world, they really don't have any control over what that becomes, right? And to me, that a lot was being said about that, about art and artist and the relationship between art and artist. And when art, takes on a life of its own, does the artist lose control of that? And then there's also the obsessive parts of being an artist and the fact that she knows she shouldn't go back, but she has to go back to finish the film.
Yeah, it's very all consuming.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this is true or not, because of course I don't have any way to prove it or not, but I often wondered, I mean, like when I did my music degree, I definitely practiced as much as the next person. Because you would have probably, I would say on average, you practiced 4 or 5 hours a day. And then you had rehearsals as well for whatever ensembles you were, taking part in. But there were just some people who were always playing, and that were obsessed with that. And I often wonder, like I was okay, but not talented. I had to work hard to achieve what I achieved. And I don't think work would have made up for any of that. I think I believe that there's an innate level of talent in different people for different things, and that you can work on that and get better, but you're never, and I'm hesitating because I know that hard work counts for so much, but I think there's also not just the work, but the drive and the talent, and that mix. There's a kind of like a magical mix of, do you have some talent for this, but do you also work really hard? Like, I don't believe that people just magically achieve things. They've worked for it.
And when you watch documentaries and stuff about people who are at like the top of their craft, whatever it is, it often seems like it's like an obsession.
Absolutely.
Like it's just all consuming. Yeah. They have to sacrifice a lot of other elements of their life.
Yeah.
And I think most people aren't willing or maybe even able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's what I feel like in hindsight, and even now, I mean, I feel like I have a lot of balance in my life, but because I'm not obsessed by one thing.
Yeah. Other than buying tech, but you only have so much money. So
well, that's the thing.
There's some limiting factors.
I'd be obsessed by that too if I had more cash. But
so, do you feel like the film is making commentary on that?
Yes.
Yeah, especially when you look at the mother.
Yeah.
And the fact that like she wasn't allowed to go out with her friends and she had to sneak out in the middle of the night and come back. It seemed to be like there's an unhealthy obsession with this project. Yeah. And then the boyfriend kind of accuses her of like, you're just going crazy with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes
well,
sense.
And problematic that arguably the mother is the more talented of the two, but she's physically frail and can't do the manipulation of the characters. So anytime I think you have one person like working as a surrogate for another person's talent, I think that's always problematic.
Is it weird too that like when she discovers her creativity, that actually ends up destroying her?
Well, and I think that's all wrapped up in the messaging around art and artist and obsession and all of those kinds of things. Because when I read or I watched a YouTube interview with Robert Morgan, and in that same space, I also saw an interview about just stop motion. And I think it's interesting that this film is about stop motion because unlike a lot of things, I mean, yes, could I shoot a movie for years? Sure. I mean, Francis Ford Coppola did it with Apocalypse Now, and I'm sure other directors have done it too. But at some point, you run out of funding. You can't get the actors anymore. You can't. But I read a couple of things with stop motion animators where they've been working on something for years.
That Mad God apparently took.
Yeah.
Was it 10 or 18 years or something crazy?
And I think that's it. Like for animators and stop motion animators, it is an obsessive because it's such an incremental. And I have to say, I was
seems like a lot of room for perfectionism as well. Like she was like, oh, a half a millimeter, and she made her redo it all over again. Yeah. So for those perfectionist personality types, I can see that
100%.
being pretty brutal. Sorry, were you going to say? I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, like, it really interested me that I actually looked up some stop motion software
Oh, no way.
to see. I mean, there's the high end software is high end. Like, it's
Stay tuned for our stop motion intro for season
Totally.
6.
I do want to work on this actually, because the one I was looking at is a cheap one through. I know these two words don't usually go together, through Mac.
A cheap Apple product.
It's on the App Store. So the professional grade stop motion animation software is like $400 or something. I'm like, nah, for experimenting, I don't think I want to play with that. But there's one, I think it's called Stop Motion Studio or something. Anyway, it's like $12.
That might be the one my daughter's using.
Yeah. You can do it on iPad or So it looked kind of fun, and it looked like, oh, I like playing, with Lego characters and like photographing them and stuff. So
It's a cool effect. Like, I think that was the highlight of the film for me, was the stop animation. And I really would like to go watch Mad God.
yeah, I've definitely got a copy of it, and I just haven't watched it yet. And to your point about this being too long, I think that one is only an hour or 65 minutes or something.
Yeah, usually you're the one finding the film too long. Did you find this film too long?
I didn't actually. I did find it slow.
Yeah.
I would agree with that, but I didn't find it overly long. I think it's only 93 minutes.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. This might not be fair. I wondered if this film was a bit self-indulgent.
From the director's perspective, like,
Maybe.
because I could see that.
Yeah, I don't know. I wrote that down. Maybe I was feeling that a bit, but maybe I was starting to feel a bit frustrated. So maybe that's not fair.
But I also wonder, like, from a creative perspective, why would you not use the things that you know and create like a world of horror around that, as opposed to, like, if he knows stop motion and he likes it, then why not incorporate that into your story?
Oh yeah, no, it's not. I didn't find the use of stop motion to be self-indulgent.
Oh, okay.
Something about just the overly metaphorical.
Okay, yeah. Is he trying to be too?
Yeah,
clever
they
for
just
his
do
own-
it too much. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
In that
yeah.
way. Sorry, not related to the
Yeah,
stop
okay, I get
animation.
it. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Now, so this is related to the film, but not really. I mean, they mention, so the mom calls her daughter Poppet,
Yeah.
which, I don't know if did you ever read The Crucible, Arthur Miller? Okay. Anyway, he's an English major, by the way.
No, I think that's why I feel like maybe we did
Okay.
in an English class. Yeah.
Okay. So the only reason I mention that is because that's just kind of an old English term, that poppet, for the dolls that they made.
Mhm.
So why is it, like, I think about we've done Megan, we've mentioned Chucky on here. There's like the Puppet Master series of movies. There's all these different things. Why do you think, what is scary about puppets and those animated kind of characters?
Yeah,
you
I wonder
think?
if there's something unsettling about something that's inanimate being animated, something you don't expect. And aesthetically, it is a little bit off-putting and creepy. Like
For sure.
anytime a doll moves, A, because it's not supposed to, and B, because it actually looks just kind of creepy. I think that's part of it. But do you find, actually, this was a question I was going to ask you as well. I don't actually find doll horror very scary. Like all these films that do have like animated dolls and animated puppets and whatever, like none of that really affects me on a horror level. Like I don't find it creepy, but I think some people find it very unsettling. So where do you fall on that spectrum of, like, do you find any of those things actually creepy or scary?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the film and how the character's being moved or used. Because, so for example, one of the things, was it Harryhausen? As I'm getting the name right, that he was a stop motion animator for all the Sinbad movies. I think it's Harryhausen. So that was filmed. It's kind of choppy, right? It was 24 frames per second. But I saw a really cool thing where they've redone, like somebody has chosen to redo some of those scenes at 120 frames a second, so that when they replay it at at 24. It's actually much smoother motion.
Right.
Because so if you want to try this, if you film something at 24 frames and then put it in slow motion, it's going to seem choppy because you're getting 24 frames in a second, but remember that those are still shots and they're put together as 24 frames in a second. Now, if I do 120 frames in a second, there's a lot smoother motion between. So anyway, I mentioned that just as I think it depends on how the character is being or how the puppet is being used, how it's shown. I think when I'm taken out of the film is when it's something unbelievable, either in the way it moves or the strength it has or something like that. Something where you're like, there's no way that could do what they're showing it. So, for example.
So how did you, with this film then, did you have that reaction?
No.
Okay.
I didn't. But for example, if we think about Megan, if Megan didn't have like a skeleton, like an endoskeleton underneath the skin, then it would take me out of the film because I would question her strength.
Right.
Whereas in this one, at least my interpretation is they don't have the stop motion, like the wax dolls, really do anything that would be way above their.
Right, so they're operating within like the limits of their material.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, well, I'll just get a hairdryer and melt you. How about that?
Yeah.
I just feel like that's the only time I appreciate the doll films. Well, I found there were Annabelle scenes that were scary.
Yeah, that's true. Annabelle maybe a bit more so.
Not many, because some of them were really awful films, but some of them were good.
Do you think, to your original question, maybe it's the idea that usually dolls or puppets are things that we are in control of.
Yes.
And so when we lose control and they're acting on their own without our control, then that's threatening and that's unsettling.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, Annabelle. But Annabelle is different maybe because it's like possessed by a demon. So there's like a demonic force working within that as opposed.
But what's supposed to be happening with her and the...
I guess Annabelle is like, or not Annabelle, Megan's like an AI.
Yeah, but so what's supposed to be happening in this one? Do you think that...
Well, in this one, this is where I felt like it was just all in her head, I thought.
Okay.
Because everything was operating on him. I thought this was just all happening in her head. I didn't think anything was actually really threatening or... Okay. So what, if anything, is real? I think that's probably what I found frustrating. I wasn't sure. Like, I thought her wounds were self-inflicted. And
the girl's not real.
Yeah, the girl's not real. And her project, I think, the way it came to life when she was around was just happening in her head.
Okay, so she's just imagining those things is your take.
That's kind of what and maybe that's why I didn't find it very scary. Maybe that's not correct, but that's sort of what I thought. It didn't give me reason to really think otherwise. It seems so metaphorical and things seemed so unrealistic that I just assumed this is all just surrealist.
Okay.
But how did you interpret it?
Well, I agree with you. I think that was part of my frustration too, is I wasn't sure how to interpret. I kind of felt it was a mix. I felt like there were some things that were going on in her head, like the girl. And I questioned whether some of the things were real, like whether. So, for example,
and I think that frustration of not knowing is maybe I just kind of gave up. Like, I can't really tell.
Yeah.
I get the metaphor,
that's
but
fair. Yeah, I couldn't tell you what I thought was real and not real. I just thought that it was a mix and that the girl wasn't real. I struggled with the outcome of the film. Is like, okay, she goes into this little room. Is that supposed to be her spirit? Is she dead and just like this is her existence? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the parts when she was interacting with her brother and the brother's sister, I was engaged during that part. All the stop animation, I was like, that's cool stop animation. But at no point was there tension or was I scared or I was just like, I appreciated the technical elements.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you find it scary at all?
No, I don't think scary.
No.
There were, I think, more like you mentioned already. There were some pretty over the top body horror moments.
Yeah.
Those were the
When
moments.
she was like rubbing her face and it was like waxy,
Yes.
like that was cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, I felt the thigh, the stitches was cool.
Yeah.
And even like I thought she did a really great job in the performance of making me believe that she was really digging in her leg.
Yeah.
Like it was pretty uncomfortable.
And what did you make of when she does the drugs and she's like pinching her boyfriend's back or whatever? Was that just her manipulating, controlling?
Yeah, I don't know. Cause that whole scene or that whole segment of the film where they're at the party and like there's the like lap puppet kind of thing, the ventriloquist dummy sort of thing. And then there's the lights and there's the guy that hit with the beer bottle. And then she's
like playing with
she kind of plays with his wound. But you notice that it was her little girl self that was pushing her arm.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So yeah, I liked some of the things. I mean, that scene or group of scenes in there with the slow motion and the lighting is what reminded me of Censor.
Yes.
That scene.
I like the opening scene with the strobe light.
Yes.
I thought that was really actually maybe one of the best scenes in the film was the opening scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think accounts for the discrepancy in critic score versus audience score?
Yeah, I think kind of what I was saying is that I feel like technically everything is good.
Right.
Like the performances are good, the lighting is good, it's operating on like a deeper metaphorical level. The stop animation is cool. I can't really point to anything on a technical level and say it wasn't well done. Like I think the film is well done, but I also think it's pretty boring and hard to follow. And like if that's why I don't think I'd recommend it because I think most people will not enjoy it. I think you really have to like those like art house,
right,
indie slow burn films. So yeah, I think that's what it counts.
And so you were thinking then that probably the critics, because we've had this quite a few times.
We have, yeah.
But most of the time we're in agreement with the critics. Like we can see where they're coming from.
Yes.
I'm not even sure I can see. I mean, I think I enjoyed the film more than you did, but I'm not sure even I can see a 90.
90 maybe is a bit high.
It's a bit high.
Yeah. Like her performance is very good.
It is. Like I think that 5.6 IMDb, like a, kind of like a C, it's not, there are elements that are really good, but it doesn't hold together. It doesn't gel.
Yeah. And if I were to say, I would just say skip this and watch Censor or Hereditary or Men or something instead. Like if you're looking for a more compelling art house indie film, unless you're really drawn to this idea of stop animation and you really like stop animation, that might be an extra hook. But I just feel like
for me, the difference would be, the subject matter that this has it's interesting in the sense of what it's doing.
Yeah.
So if you like indie films and you don't mind sitting through that slow burn.
But even then, maybe Mad God would be better. I haven't seen it, so I can't say. But
yeah, I haven't seen it either. I heard really good things about it, and I'm curious to see it, but I haven't.
And I could see his short films being really interesting. Like part of my complaint is it felt like there wasn't enough, ironically, not enough meat to like make it a full film.
And it did sound to me like in the interview, he made this comment, and it's coming to mind now because of what you're saying, that I think it might have been his first short. He knew that it was too long. It was 23 minutes.
Oh, interesting.
For the film circuit, the festival circuit, but he just didn't care. He's like, well, that's the film I made, and play it or don't. And so I wonder if that attitude,
he applied that same mentality,
right? It was like, okay, this is the film that I've made. I don't want to cut anything or add anything. So this is what it is. Take it or leave it.
And the reviews I've read now seem to go one way or the other.
Yeah.
Like they really appreciate the technical elements and the like craftsmanship, or they thought it was really slow and boring.
So this is not our first 2024 film, if you want to call this 2020.
It is not.
Done Immaculate.
Yeah.
And what was the other?
Just immaculate so far.
Oh, just immaculate so far. Okay.
Until next episode.
Until next episode. Are we saying what it is? No.
Yeah, we can. I think our next episode is Late Night with the Devil.
Indeed.
So
we
this
saw
is-
that in the theaters.
We did, which I think it's getting sort of a limited release. So if you can go see it before our next episode, maybe check it out and you can come back and see what we thought. Anything else from you on this one?
Nothing else for me on this one.
Okay.
So
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the aisles.